Welcome back to Storiez 13, where the shadows never sleep. Tonight, we'll follow Alex as he uncovers the truth behind a path no villager dares to walk after midnight. Get comfortable, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for a story that may keep you awake until dawn. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I have a story that will make you think twice about taking a late-night stroll, especially in a place you don't know. This is the story of a path that should never be walked after the clock strikes 12. Our story begins with Alex, a seasoned traveler who prided himself on finding beauty in the world's quietest corners. His latest journey led him to a remote village nestled deep in the countryside, a place that seemed untouched by time. The air was crisp, the cottages were quaint, and the locals were friendly, though there was a certain watchfulness in their eyes. Alex checked into a rustic inn, the only one in the village, and was immediately charmed by its old-world feel. That evening, as he enjoyed a simple meal in the inn's common room, the innkeeper, a weathered man with a kind but solemn face, leaned in close. "You'll enjoy your stay, son," he said, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "Just one piece of advice. Stay clear of the old forest path at the edge of the village. It's beautiful by day, but after midnight no one walks that path. No one." Other villagers nodded in grim agreement, their faces shadowed and serious. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dire warning. They spoke of strange disappearances, of people who went for a walk and were never seen again, their stories fading into local legend. Alex, ever the rationalist, dismissed it as simple folklore, the kind of ghost story every small town tells to spook visitors. But that night, as he lay in his bed, the silence of the countryside was broken by a peculiar sound. It was the soft, rhythmic crunch of footsteps on the gravel road outside his window. It was well past 2 a.m., far too late for a casual stroll. He peeked through the curtains, but the road was empty, bathed in the pale moonlight. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, before fading into the distance towards the forest. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air crept down his spine. Curiosity, that old and dangerous friend, began to stir within him. The next night, the same thing happened. The phantom footsteps, the empty road. The villagers' warnings echoed in his mind, but instead of fear, they sparked a defiant curiosity. What was so terrifying about a simple dirt path? Alex was a man who had hiked treacherous mountains and navigated dense jungles. A little forest path was hardly a challenge. He decided he had to see for himself. He would debunk the village myth. So, as the old church clock in the distance began its slow, heavy toll for midnight, Alex slipped out of the inn. He walked to the edge of the village, where the forest loomed like a dark, sleeping giant. With the final 12th chime still hanging in the air, he took a deep breath and stepped onto the forbidden path. The moment his foot touched the packed earth, a profound change occurred. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but a deep, unsettling shift in the atmosphere. The gentle night breeze that had been rustling the leaves just moments before died completely. The constant, comforting chirping of crickets and other night insects fell silent. The only sound in the entire world was the crunch of his own boots on the path and the frantic thumping of his own heart. The silence was so absolute, so unnatural, it felt like the world was holding its breath. He was wrapped in a thick, soundless blanket, and the feeling of being utterly alone was immediate and overwhelming. He walked deeper, his flashlight cutting a nervous beam through the oppressive darkness. That's when he saw them. Faint bobbing lights, like old-fashioned lanterns, swaying gently in the distance, further down the path. They moved with a graceful, rhythmic motion, as if being carried. Yet, as his eyes adjusted, he saw no one. No hands held the lanterns. No figures walked beside them. They floated in the darkness, ethereal and silent, beckoning him forward into the woods. A part of him screamed to turn back, but another, more reckless part, was mesmerized. He had to know what they were. As he moved closer to the floating lights, another sound began to break the silence. It started as a faint murmur, like the wind through leaves, but there was no wind. The sound grew clearer, coalescing into soft, sibilant whispers that seemed to come from all around him. And then he heard it, clear as day. Alex, his name. The whispers were calling his name. His blood ran cold. He hadn't told anyone in the village his name. He had paid the innkeeper in cash and signed the register with a simple initial. No one here knew who he was. "Alex, come closer," the voices hissed, seeming to emanate from the trees themselves. Panic began to bubble in his chest. He spun around, deciding this was enough. He would go back to the inn, lock his door, and leave at first light. But when he turned, the path he had just walked was gone. Or rather, it had changed. The trees, which had stood in neat rows, now seemed to lean in, their branches interlocking like gnarled fingers, creating a dense, thorny wall on either side of him. The path ahead and the path behind now looked identical, a dark, narrow tunnel of foliage. He ran, his heart pounding against his ribs, but no matter how fast he went, he kept passing the same oddly shaped oak tree. He was trapped. The forest was playing with him, looping him back on himself, tightening its grip with every step he took. Exhausted and terrified, he stumbled, his flashlight beam falling on something lying half buried in the leaves. It was a shoe, an old, worn hiking shoe, covered in moss and decay. He knelt down, a strange sense of dread washing over him. The design was familiar. It was the exact same model as the ones he was wearing, his shoe, but this one was rotted, as if it had been lying here for decades. A few feet away, snagged on a thorny bush, was a piece of fabric. He pulled it free. It was the torn sleeve of a jacket, a waterproof shell, faded and shredded by time. It was from his jacket, the very one he had on his back right now. It was impossible. Yet there it was, physical proof of a future that had already decayed. A horrifying realization began to dawn on Alex as the first faint gray light of morning filtered through the dense canopy above. The whispers had stopped, the floating lights were gone, and the trees seemed to have retreated to their normal positions. He could see the end of the path up ahead, an opening into a clearing. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. As he stepped out of the trees, he didn't see the familiar cottages of the village. He didn't see the church spire or the winding road back to the inn. Before him lay a landscape he had never seen before, a mist-covered valley with strange, ancient ruins and a sky of a color he couldn't name. The path hadn't led him in a loop. It hadn't been a trick of the mind. It had led him somewhere else entirely. He was no longer in the world he knew. And as he stood there, a lone figure in an alien landscape, he finally understood the villagers' warnings. The path no one walks after midnight doesn't just lead to a scary part of the woods. It leads away forever. Thank you so much for listening to tonight's story. What do you think happened to Alex? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there, And remember, some paths are best left unwalked. I'll see you in the next video.